When the Alien Council sent a single desperate signal into forbidden space, they expected silence. What they got instead was a reply so calm, so human, that it froze the galaxy in fear. Signal received. Please hold. Humanity is on the way. A galaxy that believed it was safe. For most of recorded history, the Lithari Union believed war was a relic of the past. Their worlds were built on balance, cities woven into forests, oceans protected by law, and skies untouched by weapons. The Lithari were tall, silver-skinned beings with long fingers and eyes that reflected light like glass. They valued thought over force, discussion over dominance. They had survived because the galaxy, for a long time, allowed peace to exist. That era ended the day the Drake Dominion arrived. The Drake did not negotiate. They did not warn. They arrived in black, angular ships that bent gravity around them and erased defense platforms with cold efficiency. Entire moons went dark in seconds. Trade stations burned. Refugee signals flooded the stars. And the Lithari, who had never trained soldiers, suddenly had to choose between extinction and the unthinkable. The enemy who never stopped. The Drake were ancient. Their empire had risen and fallen multiple times, each rebirth sharper and more cruel than the last. They believed the galaxy belonged to those strong enough to take it, and keep it. Their fleets moved like predators, isolating worlds, cutting off escape, breaking morale before ground forces ever landed. Resistance was not crushed, it was studied, adapted to, and erased. In less than 6 cycles, 12 civilizations were gone. When the Drake Armada entered Lithari space, the Union Council knew the truth immediately. Their shields were ceremonial. Their fleets were scientific. Their people were artists, engineers, thinkers. They were not survivors of war. The Council of Last Options. High Speaker Elian Voss stood at the center of the council chamber as emergency lights pulsed overhead. The room was filled with elders, scientists, diplomats, none of them soldiers. Our outer defenses are failing, a coordinator reported, voice shaking. Evacuation routes are compromised. We estimate planetary collapse within 40 hours. Silence followed. Not the calm silence of thought, but the heavy silence of inevitability. Elian's hands tightened behind his back. Are there any options left? Most avoided his gaze. Then a younger counselor stepped forward. Seren Kale, a historian by trade, held a data slab clutched tightly to her chest. There is one, she said. But it was never meant to be used. The forbidden record. The chamber stirred as Seren activated the slab. Ancient symbols appeared, redacted files, sealed treaties, warnings layered upon warnings. 300 years ago, she began, the Galactic Accord encountered a species that could not be defeated, and could not be trusted. Murmurs spread through the chamber. They were not destroyed. They were isolated. Given a region of space. Bound by a single rule, do not interfere. Elian already knew the name. Everyone did. No one spoke it aloud. Humans, Seren said. The word felt heavy, like gravity itself. Stories flooded the room, half myths, half records. A species born on a world of storms, predators, and constant disaster. A species that turned weakness into tools, fear into fuel, and survival into art. They fight each other, one elder whispered. They break their own world, said another. They innovate during catastrophe, Seren replied quietly. And they adapt faster than anything we've ever recorded. The beacon of desperation. Elian turned toward the sealed pedestal at the center of the chamber. Beneath layers of energy locks rested an object older than most of their civilization. A smooth, human-made device with no ornament, no warning labels. Just a single instruction etched into its surface in dozens of languages. Activate only when all other hope is lost. If we send this signal, an elder said, voice strained, we invite something worse than conquest. Or, Seren replied, we invite survival. Outside the chamber, the sky burned. Orbital debris fell like dying stars. Refugee transports screamed through atmosphere corridors that no longer existed. Elian exhaled slowly. History will judge us, he said, placing his hand on the beacon. But history will not exist if we do nothing. He pressed the activation switch. Somewhere humanity heard. The signal crossed light years in seconds, cutting through restricted space, bypassing barriers no other species dared approach. Deep within human territory, long-dormant systems awakened. Old ships powered up. Emergency lights flashed across hangars that had not seen action in decades. On a command deck orbiting a blue-white star, a human officer stared at the incoming data stream. "Confirmed," she said calmly. "A non-human distress beacon. Category: existential threat." Another voice answered from the shadows. "Notify command. Wake the fleets." A pause. Then, almost gently, "Looks like the galaxy needs us again." Fear reaches the Drake. Back in Lithari space, Drake Supreme Warlord Korath the Unending observed the invasion from his throne ship. Everything was proceeding as expected, until a sensor officer stiffened. "Warlord," an unauthorized signal was detected. "From where?" The officer swallowed. "From the restricted human sector." The bridge went silent. Koratha's claws tightened around his throne. He had lived for centuries. He had conquered stars. And for the first time in his long existence, he felt something unfamiliar. Unease. The galaxy holds its breath. The beacon had been answered. Not with threats. Not with weapons. But with certainty. Across the stars, ancient powers stirred. Old fears resurfaced. Records once dismissed as exaggerations were suddenly reviewed with urgency. The humans were coming, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as something far more dangerous. Because humanity never fought for glory. They fought because someone had pushed them too far. The Drake War fleet ruled the stars, until their sensors screamed a single warning. Multiple mass signatures detected. What arrived was not an army begging for mercy. It was humanity, calmly stepping onto a battlefield they had already won in their minds. The silence before arrival. Across Lithari space, something strange happened. The Drake advance slowed. Not because of resistance, but because of confusion. Long-range sensors began to malfunction. Quantum readings spiked and collapsed. Gravity wells appeared where nothing should exist. Navigation systems argued with themselves, reporting empty space and impossible mass at the same time. On the Drake flagship, Supreme Warlord Korath rose from his throne. "Report," he growled. A sensor officer's voice trembled. "Unknown vessels are exiting slip space, not using known lanes." "How many?" Korath demanded. The officer hesitated. "We don't know." Humanity does not announce itself. Human ships did not arrive in formation. They appeared scattered, above planets, behind moons, inside regions considered unstable or suicidal by galactic standards. Some arrived silently. Others arrived with controlled bursts of energy that briefly outshone nearby stars. They did not broadcast threats. They did not open fire. They simply arrived. To the Lithari observers watching from underground shelters, the sky changed color. Red nebula light bent around massive silhouettes. Shapes too angular, too purposeful, too deliberate to be alien in design. "These ships," one scientist whispered. "They're inefficient." Seren Kale frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're overbuilt. Redundant systems everywhere. Armor layered on armor. Designs meant to survive failure after failure." She swallowed. "They're built to keep fighting even when broken." First contact. Human style. A single transmission cut through every open channel. Drake, Lithari, neutral alike. The signal was clean, calm, and unmistakably human. "This is Acting Fleet Marshal Elias Rowe, Terran Coalition." A pause. "We've received your distress call." The Drake bridge erupted in alarmed hisses. "You are trespassing," Korath roared into the channel. "This system belongs to the Drake Dominion." Rowe's reply came instantly. "No, it doesn't." Another pause, longer this time. "You've been hurting people who asked for help," Rowe continued. "That makes this our problem." The humans study first. The Drake expected immediate attack. Instead, the humans waited. Human ships began deploying thousands of small probes, fast, bright, impossible to track. They dove into battles, scanned wreckage, observed Drake tactics in real time. They are not engaging, Dracan officers muttered in disbelief. They are learning, a strategist whispered. Within minutes, human fleets knew everything: weapon frequencies, shield refresh cycles, command hierarchies, even psychological response patterns. Humanity had a rule older than spaceflight: never fight blind. The first shot. The first human attack did not come from a battleship. It came from a drone. A small, cheap, unimportant-looking object slammed into a Drake cruiser and detonated, not with force, but with signal noise. The cruiser's shields flickered, confused. Power surged into the wrong systems. Then another drone hit. Then 10. Within seconds, the cruiser shut down entirely, dead in space, unharmed, intact. What weapon was that? Korath demanded. A terrified officer answered. It wasn't. Chaos in perfect order. Across the battlefield, Drake ships began failing, not exploding, not burning, just stopping. Weapons powered down. Engines locked. Communications dissolved into static. Human ships moved calmly through the chaos, targeting only command vessels, logistics hubs, and troop carriers heading toward civilian zones. To the Lithari watching in disbelief, it looked less like a battle and more like a lesson. "They're protecting us," a child whispered. "Yes," Seren said softly, "but not the way we expected." The Drake learned fear. Korath watched his armada unravel without understanding how. "We are being hunted," he snarled. "By machines." "No," a strategist replied shakily. "By minds." Human ships adapted in real time. Every Drake countermeasure worked once, then never again. Every trick was met with something new. Improvised weapons. Repurposed mining lasers. Shield harmonics altered mid-engagement. The humans did not rely on doctrine. They relied on creativity. Ground forces never land. On Lithari Prime, Drake drop ships burned in the atmosphere before reaching the surface. Human orbital platforms appeared above cities, projecting defensive fields that adjusted automatically to incoming fire. Refugees looked up and saw symbols painted on human hulls, not warnings, not flags of conquest, but names. Old names. Personal names. "These ships are named after people," Seren realized. "Why?" Elian asked. Seren's voice shook. "Because humans remember who they fight for." A message to the galaxy. Another transmission spread outward, this one public. "To all non-combatants," Elias Rowe said, "you are under human protection. Evacuations are authorized. Aid corridors are open." Then his tone hardened. "To the Drake Dominion, this ends now." Korath slammed his claws into his throne. "You think yourselves gods," he roared. Rowe's reply was quiet. "No. That's why you're losing." The turning point. For the first time in centuries, the Drake were retreating. Not fleeing, retreating. Calculating. Afraid. Human ships did not chase blindly. They boxed them in. Cut off exits. Controlled the battlefield like a board game already solved. Across the galaxy, observers took notes. The humans were not monsters. They were worse. They were prepared. Hope returns. On Lithari Prime, fires were extinguished. Medical ships landed. Human medics, soft-voiced, efficient, gentle, worked beside alien doctors without hesitation. Elian watched it all in silence. "We were warned," he said. "But not like this." Seren nodded. "We were warned about their violence," she said. "Not their mercy." The galaxy changes. As the last Drake ships vanished into forced retreat, a truth settled across the stars. Humanity had returned. Not as conquerors. Not as rulers. But as something far more unsettling to the old powers of the galaxy. A force that chose when to fight, and never forgot why. The Drake believed retreat meant survival. They were wrong. Because when humans stop holding back, the galaxy doesn't just change. It learns fear the hard way. The enemy regroups. Deep beyond Lithari space, the remaining Drake fleet limped into a fortified region of stars known as the Iron Reach. Ancient shipyards activated. Reserve fleets powered up. Warforges burned day and night. Supreme Warlord Korath stood before a projection of shattered formations and silent icons, ships that would never answer again. Humans do not conquer, he hissed to his commanders. They interfere. That is their weakness. The Drake had ruled through terror for centuries. Fear broke resistance. Fear ended wars before they truly began. So Korath chose fear. Prepare the extinction response, he ordered. If humans protect the weak, then we burn the weak first. A line humanity would not cross. The first Drake counterstrike did not target fleets. It targeted civilians. Refugee convoys traveling under human protection vanished in silent bursts of antimatter. A hospital station shielding thousands of Lithari families was cracked open from extreme range. The human response was immediate. Not with anger. With stillness. On the bridge of the Terran flagship TCS Resolute, Fleet Marshal Elias Rowe stared at the casualty report. No one spoke. No one needed to. Human commanders across the fleet received a single encrypted message. Row update. Protective status revoked 4 Drake military assets. Authorization. Total neutralization. A junior officer swallowed. Sir, that means. Rowe nodded slowly. Yes, he said. It means we're done teaching. Humanity changes the rules. The next engagement did not resemble a battle. Human fleets did not advance in lines or formations. They fractured into autonomous task groups, each thinking, adapting, deciding independently. Humanity's greatest weapon was not firepower. It was delegation. AI-assisted commanders adjusted strategies mid-second. Engineers modified weapons in combat. Crews printed replacement parts while under fire. Drake defenses, built to withstand predictable enemies, began collapsing under impossible pressure. Every human ship fought differently. Every human crew improvised. There was no pattern to learn. The Iron Reach falls. The Drake believed the Iron Reach was unbreakable. Its stars were unstable. Its gravity wells shredded careless fleets. Humans entered anyway. They slingshot capital ships around dying stars. They used gravity as armor, radiation as cover. Ships emerged battered, but alive. Human ships did not avoid danger. They used it. Within hours, Drake shipyards burned. Warforges fell silent. Entire fleets were dismantled without total destruction, engines severed, command corps isolated, weapon systems surgically erased. Observers from neutral civilizations watched in disbelief. They're not exterminating them, one analyst said. They're ending their ability to wage war. That's worse, another replied. It means the humans plan to stay. Korath faces humanity. Cornered, Supreme Warlord Korath transmitted a direct channel to the Terran flagship. You claim morality, he snarled. Yet you kill us without mercy. Rowe's face appeared on the screen, tired, human, unwavering. We didn't come to kill you, he said. We came to stop you. You could have ruled, Korath spat. You could have taken the galaxy. Rowe shook his head. That's the difference between us, he said quietly. You fight to own. We fight to protect. Korath leaned forward, eyes burning. Then you are fools. Rowe's gaze hardened. No, he said. We're survivors. The ground war humanity never wanted. On one remaining Drake-controlled world, millions of enslaved beings, dozens of species, waited in labor camps. Humanity could have bombarded the planet. They didn't. Instead, human dropships descended into active war zones, shields blazing, pilots flying manual because automation failed under interference. Human soldiers landed not as conquerors, but as shields. They fought house to house. They carried civilians under fire. They adapted weapons on the fly to avoid collateral damage. To alien prisoners watching from behind cages, it looked impossible. Creatures willing to die for strangers. One freed Lithari elder whispered through tears, "Why would you risk yourselves for us?" A human medic answered without stopping her work, "Because someone once did it for us." The Drake break. The final Drake resistance collapsed within days. Not because of annihilation, but because hope shifted sides. Enslaved species rose up behind human lines. Drake troops deserted. Commanders surrendered rather than face crews who refused to fight humans anymore. Stories spread faster than weapons. Humans don't stop. Humans adapt. Humans come back. And worst of all for tyrants, humans remember. A galaxy watches in silence. The Galactic Assembly convened in emergency session. Species that had once voted to quarantine humanity now watched them rewrite galactic balance without claiming a single throne. "They should frighten us," one delegate said. "They do," another replied. "Because they could rule, and choose not to." The meaning of power. On Lithari Prime, children watched human ships depart overhead, scarred, patched, alive. Elian stood beside Seren Kale, listening to the quiet hum of restored cities. "We thought monsters would come," Elian said. Seren smiled faintly. "They did," she replied. "Just not the kind that destroys worlds." A warning written in stars. Deep in space, wreckage drifted, Drake symbols shattered, fleets disarmed. Across the galaxy, a new understanding took hold. Humanity was not locked away because it was weak. Humanity was isolated because, when pushed far enough, they ended wars permanently. And the galaxy had just learned what happened. When someone made humanity say, "Enough." The war was over, but the danger wasn't. Because the galaxy now faced a harder question than survival. What do you do when the beings who saved you are powerful enough to rule you? After the silence of war, the stars felt different after the Drake fell. Trade lanes reopened. Refugees returned home. Burned worlds began the slow, painful work of healing. But beneath the relief was something heavier, an unspoken tension shared by every civilization watching humanity move freely through space. Human fleets did not withdraw. They repositioned. Repair ships followed warships. Supply convoys turned into aid missions. Human engineers helped rebuild alien infrastructure without demanding tribute or authority. And that frightened the galaxy more than conquest ever could. "They're staying," whispered delegates across 100 systems. "But they don't ask for anything." The Assembly reconvenes. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Assembly summoned humanity openly. The chamber was massive, floating platforms arranged in concentric rings, each holding a different species. Some delegates had never seen a human before. Others had spent generations warning their people about them. When the human delegation arrived, they did so in a single modest vessel. No escort. No weapons visible. Fleet Marshal Elias Rowe walked into the chamber wearing a simple uniform. No medals. No symbols of rank beyond necessity. The room went silent. "You were quarantined," one elder species representative said carefully. "Because you were deemed uncontrollable." Rowe nodded. "Fair assessment." Murmurs rippled. "And now," another delegate added, "you have dismantled one of the galaxy's oldest empires." Rowe met their gaze. "They dismantled themselves. We just stopped them from hurting others." Fear without an enemy. A representative from a distant core world spoke next. "What assurances do we have that humanity will not turn its strength against us?" The question hung heavy. Rowe didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to a data projection. Images filled the chamber, human worlds, past and present. Wars. Disasters. Rebuilding. "This is our history," he said. "We fight. We fail. We learn. And then we argue about it for centuries." Some delegates laughed nervously. "We don't promise perfection," Rowe continued. "We promise accountability. If we ever become what the Drake were, then you should stand against us." The chamber fell silent again, this time thoughtful. The species who stepped forward. Unexpectedly, it was the Lithari who broke protocol. High Speaker Elian rose from his platform. When the Drake came, he said, voice steady, the galaxy watched. When we called for help, most turned away. Humanity did not. He looked directly at the assembly. We do not fear humans, Elian said. We fear a galaxy without them. Others began to stand. Species once conquered by the Drake. Traders protected by human patrols. Worlds saved by fast, improvised interventions. One by one, voices joined. They freed our people. They protected our children. They rebuilt without claiming ownership. The assembly was no longer divided. It was changing. Humanity draws a boundary. Roe raised a hand, quieting the chamber. Let's be clear, he said. We don't want your governments. We don't want your territory. And we don't want your obedience. He paused. But we will respond to distress calls. We will protect civilians. And we will dismantle empires that survive on cruelty. The words were calm. They were also terrifying. The final Drake signal. As the assembly debated humanity's future, a weak transmission broke through emergency channels. It was Drake. A remnant fleet, small, desperate, had rearmed using stolen technology. Their message was simple. If humanity is not restrained, we will burn everything they protect. The threat echoed across the chamber. Eyes turned to Roe. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was no anger. Only resolve. The line becomes law. Human fleets moved before the assembly finished voting. Not to attack, but to shield. Trade routes. Refugee corridors. Developing worlds. All covered by human presence within hours. The Drake remnant never reached their targets. Human interception was precise, overwhelming, final. No broadcasts. No speeches. Just action. When the last Drake ship went silent, the galaxy understood something fundamental. Humanity did not wait for permission to do what was right. A new accord. The assembly voted unanimously. The quarantine was lifted. A new clause was written into galactic law. Humanity shall serve as an independent protectorate force, answering distress calls and enforcing civilian protection across all recognized systems. No empire. No throne. Just responsibility. Roe accepted the decision with a single nod. We'll do our best, he said. A child's question. On a rebuilt Lithari world, a young child watched a human ship depart. Will they ever leave? She asked her teacher. The teacher smiled softly. They don't stay forever, she said. They stay until they're no longer needed. The weight of choice. Human ships began moving outward, not expanding borders, but standing watch. Across the galaxy, civilizations slept a little easier. And somewhere, in the quiet between stars, humanity prepared for something they knew would come eventually. Another call. Another impossible choice. Because power was never the thing that defined them. Choice was. The war ended. The fear faded. But long after the stars grew quiet, the galaxy would remember one truth. Humanity was never the strongest. They were the ones who chose to stay. After the storm. Years passed. Not cycles. Not rotations. Years. The kind of time only humans insisted on counting, because to them, time meant responsibility. The galaxy rebuilt itself piece by piece. Trade returned stronger than before. Worlds once silent with loss now echoed with voices, art, and life. The scars remained, but they became reminders, not wounds. Human fleets were still there. Not dominating space. Watching it. The protectors who asked for nothing. Human ships patrolled borders where pirates once thrived. Human engineers stabilized stars damaged by ancient wars. Human medics traveled farther than any army ever had, into plague zones, radiation storms, collapsing habitats. They accepted no payment. When asked why, the answer was always the same. Someone needs help. That unsettled old powers more than conquest ever could. Stories replace fear. Among younger civilizations, the word human began to change meaning. Not monster, not conqueror, but something new. Children across the galaxy played games pretending to be human pilots. Artists painted murals of patched human ships arriving through fire. Poets wrote about creatures who evolved on a world that tried to kill them, and failed. They don't quit, the stories said. They adapt. They come back. Humanity's greatest test. One day, a signal came from deep, uncharted space. Not a distress call. A warning. A force older than the Drake. A silent intelligence that consumed stars, erased civilizations without malice or hate, only hunger. The assembly panicked. Even humanity cannot fight this, some cried. Ro, now older, listened quietly. We're not fighting it, he said. The room fell silent. We're slowing it down, he continued. We're buying time. For everyone. The galaxy watched in disbelief as human fleets moved towards certain destruction, not to win, but to delay. To sacrifice. To endure longer than anything else could. Humanity didn't stop the threat alone. But they made survival possible. The choice that defined them. When asked why they kept standing between danger and everyone else, a young human captain answered simply, because we know what it's like to be alone. That answer spread farther than any fleet ever could. A legacy written in behavior. The galaxy changed, not because of force, but because of example. Civilizations began forming mutual defense pacts. Aid became faster. Cruelty became less tolerated. Not because humans demanded it. Because humanity proved it worked. The final lesson. Long after Elias Rowe passed into history, long after new human generations took his place, the galaxy remembered one lesson above all others. Power doesn't make monsters. Fear doesn't make monsters. Choice does. And humanity, flawed, stubborn, endlessly creative humanity, chose to protect instead of rule. The last words in the stars. On a distant world, a monument stood. Not carved in stone, but encoded into a pulsar's rhythm, broadcast endlessly across space. It read, "Here stood humanity. They were not perfect. They were not peaceful. But when the galaxy needed someone to stand in the dark, they did." The story never ends. Somewhere, another civilization looked up at burning skies. Somewhere, a beacon waited. And somewhere in human space, ships remained ready, scarred, repaired, named after people who mattered. Because humanity never believed they were heroes. They just believed. Someone had to answer the call.